how do we do this? How do you do that? How do you mine all this data? How do you look through all this data in a way that makes sense? And really, there's three things that I like to focus on. One is social scoring. One is social prospecting, and that's the ability to go out to different areas of the social web and collect information on individuals based on what it is that they're doing in the conversations they're engaging in. And we'll talk more about these in a lot more detail. Number two is collecting those social profiles. So really, in an automated fashion, being able to go out and find and identify social profiles across multiple channels, link them together, and then decide who are the best either influencers or buyers or whatever it is based on scores that you apply to them. So the social scoring component of all the content and information that you're gathering back. So let's drill into that a little bit more and just give you a sense of how it looks across the board. So it starts with social prospecting, which is really listening for conversations across the web, capturing those social profiles, scoring all those profiles and leads, offering targeted messaging at them, and then converting them into revenue. Let's start with social prospecting. Social prospecting is all about paying attention. It's about paying attention to the conversations and actions that demonstrate a likelihood of a sale, identifying buying signals and listening for them. Now, you've probably all heard of monitoring, and there's a bunch of different platforms and different ways to monitor information on the social web. So there are different areas that you're going to look at. Now, where most people focus is on really the bottom up. You start to focus on things like brand, and if you're using Pella Windows, for example, you want to know about Pella or any specific brands, any products like casement or awnings or double hung windows or bay windows, whatever it is specifically. Product domain, industry, associated customer problems, I have broken windows or drafts, any competitors. What you want to do is also start to look at things like associated buying, and that's what the heart of social prospecting is all about. What conversations are people going to be engaged in that are about buying? And I'll give you an example with Pella. So there are two types of things that you're going to listen for, explicit and implicit. So for example, a very explicit person who's looking to buy windows might say something like, looking to buy new windows. Has anyone had experience with Pella? Or they might say, what is the cheapest place to buy windows? Or I'm looking for recommendations on windows. But more implicit stuff where people aren't actually coming out and talking about it might be, I can't get this draft to stop. It's cold in here. Well, that's someone you want to engage with. That's some profile information you want to collect on that person to get a better understanding of what's happening with them. Or I just started working on my new addition. Or just bought the new house and I'm getting ready to move in next week. All buying cues or potential buying cues that are going to indicate that someone's interested in taking the next step and looking at a product, potentially. And one of the great examples of a company that I've had the opportunity to work with in the past is actually an automotive company, a little bit different than Windows. And what they look at is, of course they look at the explicit stuff. They look for people who are saying I'm going to test drive SUVs, or they're going to, they're in the market for a new car, people who are saying very explicit things. They collect the profile data from across social. They send it, believe it or not, to the dealers in regional areas of where these conversations are taking place so that they can follow up with them. But they also look for implicit information, and because they have such a really solid idea of when people buy and the reasons that people buy, they're able to really hyper-target people on the social web based on the conversations that are happening. So they look for life events. And one of the big life events, believe it or not, is when people have not just one child, but have two children. So they want to target those people because they know that they're much more likely to buy a new family-sized car that can hold 2 car seats and all the stuff you end up bringing around with a bunch of kids. Really important stuff. And once you understand what that criteria is, you can set up prospecting monitors to go out on the web, listen for different conversations that are happening, and pull in social profile information. Let me give an example of another company that does this really well. It was actually happened during the Indianapolis Super Bowl last year. The Super Bowl host committee actually leveraged this concept to collect a whole bunch of information on the people that were in Indianapolis for the big game. And they used it for a bunch of different reasons, one of which being these are people that are likely to travel on behalf of specific teams to get more information on who they are, what they are, and use that information to market to them going forward. Now, at the end of the day, people say, well, what is social profiles and what are they? And how do I collect them? Well, social profiles are really made up of 3 unique things. One is any new posts or engagement or actions on social networks like Twitter or Facebook or Tumblr or Flickr or the outdated StumbleUpon logo that's there. And that's all public available information. This is the conversations that people are happening, whether or not they're engaging with your brand or you directly. It's a conversation that could be happening anywhere that we want to know about. We want to identify who those people are. But there's also the engagement on specific brand-owned destinations. For example, your Facebook page, your Twitter account. All that information we want to be able to pull in and associate with OneRecord. We also want to do any contests or any downloads that people have, and maybe a Facebook contest or sweepstakes or giveaway. We want to associate that with one single profile record. And the important thing here is it's allowing us to paint a really deep, elaborate picture of who these people are. What are they talking about? What topics are of interest to them? Is there a specific location or time of day that they talk more about stuff? Are they engaging with our content or other content? Are they having conversations with influencers? Are they an influencer? Did they participate in any of our contests or applications? And the best example of this in my world is when I think about how I use how I use marketing automation and how social marketing compares. If you think about anybody on the phone who's ever used a marketing automation system knows that it's typical to be able to collect somewhere between 5 and 10 fields of information on someone. Basic demographic information with a bunch of questions that you get to ask on a web form. And yeah, you can grow that over time. But consider social profile data. It's really rich, and it's hundreds of fields of information. So for example, if I was to look at someone, and this is actually a real social profile of someone I was able to capture, but I know that they studied at Harvard and Virginia. I know that they have an amplified reach of 23 million. I know that their influence is by themes like venture capital and investing and entrepreneurship. They're fans of 80s comedies. I can get all this deep information on them along with all the content that they're publishing, all the conversations they're engaging with. This is a really big concept because it's about listening to the web, but not just for content, but for that profile information. I want to know whenever they change their profile information. I want to know when they update it. I want to have a better sense of what makes this person tick overall. And the best example I can give for that is actually, if you think about traditional marketing, if you think about a trade show. I'm going to tip my hat to Dave Carter, our CTO here, who actually did some of these slides. But if you think about a trade show, it starts out where, if you're participating in a show, you have a whole bunch of people there, a whole bunch of companies that have a bunch of booths. But there's a group of people that come in and they're just going to either walk the floor, maybe they don't even walk the floor in some cases. Well, those people that just register to attend a trade show, that's kind of like social prospecting. You want to hear those individual conversations that people are having, and you want to know who those people are, but in a lot of ways you can't. The only time you can really engage with them is when they stop by your booth, and that's similar to direct engagement with your brand on like a Facebook or a Twitter or whatever it is. And you might even be able to take it the next step if they enter your drawing or hand you a business card, and that's similar to running a campaign on a social channel. But at the highest level, could you imagine being able to go to a trade show and hear any conversation or interesting event or interesting moment that's happening that directly relates to what it is your company does or how your company or a possible sales situation for your company? Well, that's what social prospecting is all about. It's all about listening for the right conversations and capturing that social profile information. So let's talk about social scoring, which is the end result of all this stuff, because at the end of the day, what you've done, if you're doing social prospecting and you're collecting profiles, is what you've done is just collect a boatload of data. Literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions, depending on the size of your business, of pieces of profile information. What social scoring does is allow you to apply a methodology to it that's dynamic and identifies individuals on actions over time. This is a dynamically changing list, and there's a couple of steps you need to do to really nail social scoring right. The first is to understand a path to purchase. And so I'm going to use that marathon running example again. So let's say that we know, because we've done a lot of research on this marathon shoes example space, and we really know it really well, we know that typically 12 to 9 months out, runners begin blogging and tweeting about their marathon training program. So a marketing action of that is to identify who those people are and begin to casually dialogue with them throughout the process, maybe provide some tips, some suggestions on how they can update their training schedule and training regime. About 9 to 6 months out, tweets continue. 19% typically join some kind of runners group on Facebook maybe, or start to network more closely with people who are tweeting about the same stuff or participating in the race. We want to continue that dialogue, continue offering more tips, maybe training, possibly help offering them some more assistance as they start to do more stuff. 3 to 6 months out, runners begin to look for new shoes, equipment, that kind of thing, because they want to have time to break them in. So we might suggest purchases throughout that process, but in a very subtle way. And 3 months out is typically when a runner purchases new sneakers. So you can see, before this runner even knows who we are, we're tracking direct engagement. Before this person even knows that there's potentially an offer for shoes that we're going to sell, and I know it's a very basic, simple example, and I'm hoping you can apply this to your own company. But you have the opportunity to identify who these people are, attract them before and introduce them to your brand before they really have a solid sense of what's happening with it. And that's part one, defining the path to purchase. Part two is build a behavioral score model. So you might say, I want to get a better understanding of these people, and I want them to bump up to the top of the list depending on the weights that I apply to the actions and conversations they take. So you may want to look at specific keywords they may tweet with. You may want to know if they tweet directly with your corporate Twitter account, if they join a Facebook group, blog about a subject, blog comment on something, if they have a specific cloud score, or maybe you use this to define a cloud score specific to your company versus relying on someone like Cloud who may not know the intricacies of your business. You may comment on a LinkedIn group, and that's all behavioral stuff. Now, what I always tell people who are interested in social scoring is it's not just about social data, it's combining this with real marketing data. So combining this with stuff that they do on your website, how they respond to emails, getting a real understanding of who this person is and what really leads to a likely sale or purchase becomes really important. And just to show you what this kind of looks like in action, if we were to take score and we were to increase the score over a set given period of time, what we're looking at is the entire social web. That's that audience in the background. We may identify one person who's demonstrated the ability to become a prospect to us. We're going to call him the prospective buyer. This is the guy that has the likelihood of buying our shoes. As time goes on, he might blog about something, and we're going to give him 5 points because he's looking to buy something. As time goes on a little bit further, maybe he joined a Facebook page that we give him another 5 points for. He tweets something, any product recommendation specifically, we give him another 10 points. When he visits our website, we give him another 10 points. And you can see that this can be really elaborate, it can be incredibly detailed, or it can be very broad. Maybe we just want to put points on a specific group of people who fall into a specific bucket. And really the end result of this is targeting, hyper-targeting marketing campaigns to multiple people inside your audience based on how it is that they're doing. And what's really cool about this is essentially you have the opportunity to have people fall into multiple buckets, and this may result in multiple scores. So for example, I've just thrown something together based on what we have. And what I've done is I've looked at a name of someone, an email address, and I've associated an influence score. Influence score based on criteria I defined using social scoring. And you can see that the numbers range from 14 to 83, so Dave Carter is very influential in category 1 of influence. And how we define influence, there might be multiple categories for that based on different things. We also want to know who the most likely buyers are, and you can see that Melissa has scored a 73, which makes her the most likely buyer of our product. And we can tier this and start to segment people out based on what score they fall in. And what I should also mention is that these scores are dynamically changing because as people participate in different social channels, their score either goes up or down depending on the time frame in which they're participating. And finally, it might be another influence score that is completely different. And see, Brian gets an 83, and he's particularly influential in that thing. And you can see how multiple scores can get applied to different people that can allow us to start to target our messaging. Now, the end result of what it is that you're doing with social scoring is essentially a list, a segmented, rules-based list of data and information that gives you profiles on people that you can take and follow up with specific offers. And the big question is, well, what do I do with that? There's a bunch of scoring actions you can take, and I want you to ignore the fact that I put XXX and XX. This isn't some kind of sleazy slide that I'm trying to put up here or some advertising for pornography, but it's to show you that there are multiple options coming out of the profile. For example, you might want to target your top 10 influencers for direct engagement. You might want to present a list of hundreds of leads to a sales team in a specific region based on how they score. You might want to identify top influencers and offer them a badge, for example, or invite people to join a specific group or event, or target offers to social via social to top 20 consumers, whatever it is. You can sync this list to your email or CRM system. You might want to encourage conversation to blogs for further comment. The bottom line is there's a bunch of stuff you can do with this information. The important part to take away is these lists can be as broad as the entire web, or as detailed as you want, depending on how many criteria that you're including in how you prospect, number one, and then how you score those people. Now, the outcome of this is huge, and this first one has been gigantic, internally for us, as well as a lot of our clients and a lot of the folks I work with who have adopted social scoring. The social web essentially becomes your marketing database. Now, I know this is a tough concept to think of, and I know most people in the social media space don't like to talk about, your followers and clients or whatever becoming part of your marketing database. But in a lot of ways, they are. You have the opportunity to identify people who are buyers, prospect leads. you can tier this list and create a database based on rules you define. So I just want to watch and see how trends are interacting. A great example is there's a company called Foil Cupcakes based out of Chicago. The woman who runs the store actually attributes 94% of their revenue through Twitter, and she takes a very similar approach. What she does is identify people who are interested in specific topics that are related to her brand, and sells them cupcakes online. It's actually a pretty cool story. I'm happy to send you the case study on it. I think it's been written up a couple times out there, and I'm happy to forward it to anybody who's interested. But it also gives you the ability to define influence on your own terms. This is really important because there's been a lot of criticism of companies that provide an influence score. I'm not going to mention anything by name. I'm sure a lot of the folks online can figure it out. There's been a lot of criticism because it's really difficult to understand how they, number one, define what influence is in specific areas. Number two, they can be gamed very, very easily, where you can, the more you tweet, the higher your score goes up. The more you talk about a specific subject, you can create, your own influence topics in different areas. But what social scoring gives you the ability to do is to find influence on your own terms. So my business, I can define who influencers are. I can go in and identify who the right people are that I should be talking to. The last thing is it gives you the opportunity to better understand the customers you have and uncover the ones that you don't across a very wide social web. Now, I'm the first to tell you that there's a lot of automation behind the scenes on this. There's a lot of stuff that needs to go on inside your company to make social scoring a reality. And the truth is there's a lot of different systems that need to be put in place for it. I didn't get into a lot of detail on this inside this presentation. In fact, I purposely didn't put that in because I did not, A, want it to come across as, pitching specific products or services, and two, I wanted to make sure that that everybody got a good sense of what the strategy behind social scoring was. And I'm happy to answer any questions